I stand between you and lunch. John says he doesn't hate me, but he's given me the slot before lunch and the slot before you go home. So, yeah. Right. So, in order to keep well, two things. Number one is to get you to do some of the work, and number two, to prove that this is probably the most important section, mainly because it's the one I'm presenting. But okay, there you go. We're just going to have a little exercise, if you like. Do you like? Really quick. Okay. Everybody has to do it. Everybody has their own answer. No sharing. Here are the rules. I'm going to give you a description of a contract term for a medical contract. Okay? So I'm going to give you the thing that explains the word. I'll give you a few letters, and I'd like you as fast as possible to write down the thing I'm talking about. And as soon as you've written it down, I'd like you to put your hand over it so no one else can see your answer. Okay? Everybody ready? Everybody got a pen? This is a high-speed exercise. If you look at me blankly, it could take longer. Have you got a pen and a piece of paper? Ready? Okay. The importance of accurate drafting and preparation of the contract. Here we go. Anybody here got a medical degree? We're off to a good start. No, that's it. Okay. So, one word. Right? This is the definition, or a loose definition. It's a body part. Okay? It works best when erect. And I'd like you to rearrange the following letters to spell that body part. And then put your hand, ready? P-N-E-I-S. Go. Write it down, write it down. Quick. Hide it. Stand up if you wrote down spine. Right, everyone else can go home. So that's the point really, is half the room was thinking about spine. I don't know what everyone else was thinking about, but it was definitely something different. Right, let's move on. Yeah, so you're here, or you're here, and you're also here, preparing the contract terms and requirements. That's all I was going to say. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on the eyesight test. Can everybody actually read that? No. That's good. So it's a great way of preventing questions. Really what you want, it's in the guide, but really what you want to see is there are a series of inputs that we'll talk about before you go through the preparation of a contract. There's a fairly straightforward process to follow that through, which is get the team you need together to do it, make sure you've got the inputs, put it all together, make sure it's coherent, make sure it makes sense, yeah, and that should represent your outputs. Now, what I'm going to talk about for about the next 22 minutes, because that's all I've been left, is a little bit about the practicalities of that and the different contexts that you could have in that. Yeah, so I'm not actually going to take you through page by page on that section of the guide, because you can read that for yourselves at your leisure. So the key thing to think about is, considering nobody had a medical degree, about half of you got the right answer. It wasn't spine, but there you go. Quite often you will be, who here is has a technical background other than project management? Okay, so again, it's probably about half, just over half. Who is working in their original technical background that they did? So pretty much everyone else is making up as they go along, aren't they? I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'll manage it and it'll all be fine. Yeah? Good job we didn't have too many people with medical degrees. So this is the real kicker, right? You can do everything up to this point really, really well. You can have a brilliant idea for a project that can be an absolute winner. You can do lots and lots of really good research. You can come up with a stunning contract package strategy, yeah? And then you can completely cock it up by not paying attention to writing the contract. Has anybody been in receipt of a really badly put together contract? Right. How easy is that?
Mexican one.
Well, right. Who's been in receipt of a really bad contract but just doesn't want to own up to it? That's probably the rest of the game, isn't it? Yeah. Absolutely. How hard is that to fix? This is like the boat sail picture, isn't it? You're stuffed. That is the point where you are making the best of what you've got. Yeah? And invariably, it's not as good as what it could be. So this is really, really important. So, it can really kill you. Particularly if it doesn't reflect the contract strategy, contains ambiguities and inconsistencies. Oh, I've got an example of that, which is great. But it's not just the ambiguity in itself, but actually quite often contracts are put together by multiple contributors. Yeah, it's very, very rare one person sits down and writes a contract. Most of the time, it's got multiple inputs from, it'll have commercial, it'll have whatever the technical speciality is. Hopefully, it'll have some input from the people who are going to operate the contract. It's a whole bunch of people that get involved in it. So coherence and congruency is as important as clarity. That's really good. I use 3 C's in a bit. All right. So don't have any ambiguities. Think about errors and omissions. Sometimes an omission is a good thing, and sometimes, including but not limited to. Yeah. And on other occasions, you need to be explicit. So you've just got to. I think this all comes down to context, doesn't it? If I had told you that it was, spinal surgery, it would have been a lot more straightforward. But the other thing as well is you've also got to think about with your contract, when you put it together, that actually it needs to be a user manual, doesn't it? Not an impenetrable collection of mush that lots of individual people have put together that doesn't work together and you can't follow. Anybody had one of those? Okay. So, and the truth is effective contract preparation is actually its own project, but the problem is most people don't realise that. Because when we go through what you do, I'll do this and you'll hit the next slide. When I go through this, the first thing that's going to pop up in your head is, this is absolutely not rocket science, it's not difficult, it's not complicated, and I, the Royal I, have a huge amount of experience there anyway. Yeah? Who's ever let a contract? Operated a contract, exited a contract? I put it the other way around. Everybody has. You've all got mobile phones, probably either, you live somewhere, you get your water from somewhere, you buy your stuff from somewhere. That's all contracts, isn't it? In some way, shape or form. Who reads the terms and conditions? Not too many of us. Yeah. But actually, you've all got a huge amount of experience throughout your whole life on it, and it's not actually that complicated. So one of the big things is don't worry about getting stuck in, and there are no stupid questions when you're putting it together. Somebody famous said, if you can't explain it, you don't understand it. So that is a key for your contract. Whatever contract you're involved in, if you don't understand it, you speak early. Because whoever you're dealing with is not going to come up with the word spine by the time you finish. Yeah? You can do it. A real interesting example that I did in healthcare was I did the largest renegotiation of GP contracts, PMS contracts, ever undertaken in England. 69 different contracts, about £200 million in value. If I go pounds, dollars, I get confused. But this was £200 million in value, working with 7 different legacy contract forms. And then in those individual contracts, a couple of hundred issues to deal with as well. And we had 12 months to go from that to everybody on the same contract form with the same terms and actually a 5% reduction in pay as well, which was probably a bit of a kicker on that. But you can do it. We did that in 11 and a half months. So it is possible, but you have to really be sharp on the project management of it in the same way as you would any other project. Stakeholder engagement, clear scope and specification, well-briefed team, all the stuff that we talk about. It's no different from any other project. Okay, so proper planning, adequate well-briefed resources. Yeah, clear definition of what the contract's got to do at the end of it. So I kind of gave you, in that example, what the outcome was. Everybody working to the same contract for 5% less by the end of that year's contracting cycle, which was 12 months. That's kind of it, really, and everybody agrees to it. So leadership, project management skills, I mean, we all know who needs to do what by when. And that's really all it boils down to, but you need a granular plan for it. In my case, in that particular example, it's a really good one because it's actually 69 simultaneous renegotiations of existing contracts done in parallel. It's quite fun, which isn't that common. What I'm doing at the moment is just 12 straight contracts of relatively large value running in parallel to end up having built a load of stuff with some service contracts. Much more straightforward. Management of multiple stakeholders, and those stakeholders are both, can be, in that case, for example, it's the providers of the services, and it's your own internal stakeholders that you're running the project for. Identification and active management of the risks and issues associated with the contract. Who knows what a risk is versus an issue? A lot of people get confused about that. A risk is might, issue is. That might go wrong, it is going wrong. That might go right, it is going right. Positive and, so risks can be opportunities or threats. Yeah, and you need to consider both of those in forming your contract. So, you're getting pretty good at this. Before you begin, one key thing, depending on where you work in the world, I've got it at the moment because I'm working in the Middle East. So whether you work in the UK or not, but it's really worth thinking about the governing law and jurisdiction that you're going to work under, particularly if you do international jobs. I'm sure much better qualified people than me will give you the pluses and minuses of different ones, but quite often it's contested in the country of the law. So for example, if you sign up to American law because of who you're working with or custom or whatever, and it all goes horribly wrong, you can probably expect a lot of air miles to contest it. So where do you want to contest it? The other thing that's brilliant with British law is we've been at it for hundreds of years, probably before most of the Americans could write. So ours is a very well structured and there's lots of evidence and a basis on which things are built. And certainly when you move around the world, you can't guarantee that that's the case. So it is a key point. Contract structure, as I said, think of it as a user manual, right? Not something that you're going to kitchen sink everything into, but something some poor bugger is actually going to have to be able to use when you go, and here you go. Yeah? So you want to think about what the project is that the contract is wrapping up in terms of how you structure it. So if, for example, what I'm doing at the moment, we have multiple construction and service contracts. Now ideally, that works well with a lot of common chunks to that contract. So for example, health and safety. You don't want one guy, where his contract says he's got to wear boots and a hard hat, and another guy that doesn't. Because you're trying to manage that aspect on a completely consistent basis across all your contractors to keep everybody safe. So whereas other elements might need to be completely different. So payment mechanisms, if you're doing lump sum or reimbursable or some form of hybrid. So you just kind of want to think about what can you use as a boilerplate, and again, depending on what kind of contract you're doing, are you actually going to take a previous form and modify it or start from scratch? Previous form is cheaper because you're editing, and is often less, there's less risk involved because it's been used and chewed and you know what works and know what doesn't, but equally it might be a bad fit. So those are factors to consider as well. But again, think about things like main body versus annexes. Yeah, if you're going to be changing stuff or renewing stuff, it's much easier to swap out an annex. If you've got a multi-year contract, you're going to change what's tucked in underneath it. Be clear on the order of precedence. And that's probably it. One of the things in terms of contract structure, I think I mentioned it either before or later, is a really good rule for any kind of contract is ideally you want to say it once in one place and then refer to it. Otherwise you get spines and other things for the same definition, a lack of clarity. Okay. Think about how you're going to run the project. Often a combination of what you have available rather than what you'd like. So what's the expertise that you have? What's the expertise you need? How are you going to fill the gaps? What's your budget? What's your timeline? Yeah, so the more that you look at this, the more it is just another project, isn't it? The same skill set, who's going to do it all? If you're using external resources, you've got to get an estimate for how much you want them to do, what it's going to cost, how long it's going to take them. And that is often an area where you need to tread carefully, because external resources can be extremely useful if used appropriately, but they can be very expensive and ineffective if they're not properly briefed and applied. You know, banging in and out with a screwdriver. So you've got to be an intelligent customer. And then when you put your team together, decide who actually is going to lead it within a section. So clear owners and contributors. Yeah. And this really comes out of understanding who your stakeholders are. Yeah. Either as customers, operators of the contract, contributors to it, impacted parties. And then make yourself a little project plan. I've got all these bits that I've got to assemble into something coherent. So who's going to do it? What kind of timeline is it going to take to pull those various pieces together? At what point do I need to have all the bits in a bucket so I can start actually rationalising them to make them work and check them, cross-check them? How they're going to work together. It's, you know, what's the method? Are you going to use some common form of file sharing? Are they going to meet as a team? And probably a combination of a lot of things, because you will need people to sit down and actually have a conversation rather than just sit and write. Now, how often and how many depends on how much of it you've done before and how uncertain it is in terms of what you're trying to achieve to get that alignment and consistency. Allow time for internal review and compilation, because at least somebody is going to write the wrong thing down or do it completely in isolation despite your best efforts at briefing. And then the other thing as well, just like in a contract, you operate change control on the preparation of the contract. So, you know, you basically want to be clear on what you're working towards, agree it as you go, stop people going backwards or coming up with brighter ideas. You need to go from management of a change into management of no change mentality. Right, this is what we are now doing, and pick the point where that happens. Does that make sense? It's all pretty standard stuff as a project manager, isn't it? Even though you're actually doing a contract. Okay. Brief the team. I tried that at the beginning. It didn't go so well, did it? Half the room understood what I was talking about. Explain the wider context and steps, how you got to where it is, because a lot of people that will get involved at contract preparation may not know what went on previously, how you got to that point, and you need their buy-in, acceptance, understanding of that to move forward. You know, knowing where you're going starts with knowing where you are, really. So you've got to get them to that place in terms of what you're trying to achieve, what you've done so far, what answers you've already got in place, what the expectations and requirements are. Yeah, the benefits you want, the risks and issues, the unknowns. That's a Donald Rumsfeld, if ever there was one. You've got risks and issues, but then you've got stuff, you know, that you really just don't know about. It's not so much a risk in the sense of may or may not happen. There are actually some things that you just don't know. No idea. Need to find something out. Really key as well is, and this links nicely to the last section, which is contract closeout, which is a part of this, is think about how you're going to operate the contract once in place. Anybody here operate a contract? Maybe you all own stuff and have contracts. Yeah. But this point is really, are you going to have a team of 500 people managing that contract with 42 KPIs delivered twice daily at GMT +1, or are you going to put a whole load of stuff in a contract that people are never going to want, never use, not be able to collect, not be able to provide, and actually be of very little value? Yeah? So what does it need to do? What are you actually going to do? Because people are I've been guilty of it in the past, coming up with magnificent governance structures that people are too busy to attend, not really that interested in, and doesn't really add much value to what you're trying to achieve. So what do you actually need to work that contract effectively as an operating group? And try and agree that up front, both with your internal stakeholders and at a suitable point make sure it's consistent with what the market expects. Another real thing that is being talked about all the way through is risk appetite. Was everybody familiar with what a risk appetite is? Anybody not? It's very simply how much risk you want to take on versus how much you want to avoid it. And we've had the thing about risk transfer, which in effect is great until the risk turns into an issue and then it comes straight back and lands at home for most people. It's very difficult to genuinely transfer risk. All you can actually do is avoid it by not doing the thing. Transfer is a very difficult thing to do. Okay. So you brief the team. You've looked at uncertainty now and actually between the contract, the change flexibility and change management. Do you know exactly what you're doing, or does the thing need to be able to evolve over time? You looked at, as I mentioned, operation, performance management, and that you can meet your obligations to the contractor provider. Yeah. Exit reversion. Wouldn't it be good to think about it now rather than at the end of the day? Plan it out in front. And so, future business considerations. So this is all really more about briefing the team. It's just really making sure that everybody is clear on who needs to do what by when. Yeah. This is an interesting one. Everybody will write it the same thing differently. Yeah, they'll have different understandings of what's required. I've said already, very few people will have the discipline initially to say it once and refer, so you have to drum that into them from the beginning and go back over it. And explain the importance of clarity to them. We said, including but not limited to, that can be really good. £150,000 a word in the vicinity of £600,000 is what that cost. And that was somebody saying, you remove all the dead services to the peripheral of where you're building, in the vicinity of. Now they went, well, that's a meter. And the person who wrote it went, no, I meant the car park you're building on. 4 words, £600,000. Yeah.
Do you mean meter?
Not quite. Specific and explicit, sanity check the reasonableness of the provisions. Yeah, you can't have a punitive contract or unrealistic expectations because you're just setting yourself up to fail to begin. And use a clarifications log all the way through, because then you get we talked about that 4 weeks ago, that's what we agreed. Yeah, a log of everything that changes so that people that come in and leave the team don't revisit. Okay, professional team, the main thing there is, and quite often with the professional team we talk about legal services as a key one that people generally do. What they're brilliant at is making your contract operate within the law, or basically making sure it is workable from a legal perspective. They can very rarely tell you anything meaningful about your business and your project. That's not what they do. Yeah? So particularly, you have to, quite often with legal resource, people expect them to solve all the things you don't know. That's not really that's a screwdriver to put a nail in. Yeah? So you really, and they can be, the downside for, I've got friends of the lawyers, the downside is people can incur huge fees, not because the lawyer is hyper expensive and trying to make a load of money, it's because they're incredibly badly briefed. So be explicit on the things. Mainly what you need them to do is to look at the risks that you're taking on in the contract, look at whether it works as a body. Now they can do everything else in between with you, but it's very expensive, high-paid help that isn't necessarily the best for the task. But they are good for cold eyes review and a sanity check, because especially if they don't understand it, then you've got no hope. The downside, as I said, is they are fee driven often. They'll do as much work as you want. It may not be the work you actually need. Some will look to, consultants can look to help lots and lots and lots. So technical specialists will write you, till the cows come home. The quality of their work as an external is, it's an input-output thing. Better the input, better the output, better the briefing, more explicit what you want them to do that's aligned to their skill set, the better it's going to be. And the corollary applies. The downside with any external resources, they will never have as much skin in the game as you. It's your contract. And in fact, I would say if you're the project manager, there isn't almost anybody. Somebody mentioned about the tendency of commercial teams to lead it. Right, when that project goes, instead of like that, goes like that, who's on the hook for it? The project manager. Commercial team are just there to support. Anyone have that? Okay, so own it from the beginning, because it's your skin. So, in summary, plan the process properly before you engage your team and the external resource. Be specific on the scope that they're going to deliver. Okay, where it's an external resource, get a quote against a scope deliverable, just like you would, that's kind of a contract for a contract, isn't it? Have a clear plan up front to integrate the component parts to get a complete rough draft as soon as possible, and that will show you the size of the gaps of inconsistencies, errors and omissions, the things that need to be worked through. Okay? Have a plan to engage with the market, the other the contractors, whoever it is. What I did with the 69 was I got them to work through a single point, a negotiator on the collective behalf. So we worked together, and then they went back behind closed doors to have their own conversation, because you can't engage all the time with the 69. So I met with all of the 69, and we all agreed that they would funnel their comments through a point source, which made it manageable. And really, don't accept anything you can't operate. If you're a project manager of a contract, or if you're project manager of a project that has a contract or contracts, if it doesn't work for you, don't accept it. Yeah? And you've got to be strong on that. You can't go, well, it's really kind of a commercial thing, I'll just get the contract. You're going to be the person that's trying to drive the car with a contract manual they give you, so make sure it'll work up front for you. And if you don't understand it, then you really are in trouble. And that's it really. It is extremely straightforward. It's mainly about proper planning, good communication, consistent approach. And ending up with something that you can use and something that you understand, because you will need to explain it to everybody else as time goes by. That's it really. Any questions?
Yeah, okay, right, so lunchtime briefing, it's apparently upset. So first of all, thank you.